So hello again guys for another deck tech for the Pioneer format. And this list I got is called the Spirit Agro, was on the Sun's Champion Cycle 3 at held last time in Hariruya, Japan. And why I'm choosing this kind of venue, because of their innovations in the way they made their decks, in which they're not only going with the top tier list but also having some variants, or let's say some deck tech or card tech in their specific builds. So for today's list, we go with the second place deck from that event. This is the Spirit Agro by Moriyama Jonki. So with the base color of Bant, we make sure that it's more of a Spirits collective company deck, but also going more with the specific on how this deck would function out, not only curving out on why it is effective in the metagame of the Pioneer format. So we start with basically 31 creatures, 6 instants, and 23 lands. So that's very pretty basic. No artifacts, no sorceries, no enchantments, and we also have the sideboard as a quick discussion later on. So we start with the 3-drop Imperial Eagle. So this one is just a basic, it was first printed in M20, I think. This one. And then it's just basically to cast 2-3, another flying creatures you control gets +1/+1. It's basically a buff, since most of your spirit creatures in this list are flyers. So the buff of Imperial Eagle is very beneficial as a support. And not only for this one, we also have Supreme Phantom as another source of buff, in which to cast 1-3, other spirits you control gets +1/+1. So 4 copies of that to help out is Imperial Eagle with 2 copies. Now next we also go with the 1-drops. That is basically the Mastery Wanderer, in which whenever spirit comes to play or enters a battlefield under your control, it gets +1/+1, and that is ability that is able to counter another target instant or sorcery spell unless its control pays X, where the X would be basing on the power of the Mastery Wanderer. So it's not only a 1/1 flyer in this sense, but then also sacrifice itself to protect you from any spot removals or mass removals, sorcery, or instants. So along with it, for the 4 copies of that card, we have 3 copies of Spectral Sailor. So this one is the art from Jumpstart. It is just a 1/1 Spirit Pirate flash with flying. At the same time, gets you to good mana sink in the late game with pay 4, draw card. So very beneficial early game as an aggro, and late game as a card draw producer with your extra mana. For the 2-drops, as mentioned, Supreme Phantom is one of the most important cards in the set in this build, and along with it are also 4 copies of Rattle Chains. So Rattle Chains again has a flash ability. When enters the battlefield, target spirit gains Spectrum on the end turn. So this is one way to protect out your spirit creatures, or your other spirit creatures you control that let's say targeted by any spot removal. So you can also have this ability that may cast spirit spells as though they had flash. So it's a good thing that you have this static build, which means that you can basically do some combat tricks. For example, with Skyclave Apparition, it can being flashy on this would be really very beneficial, like exiling any non-land, non-token permanent you don't control with converted mana cost for less. So along with the Rattle Chains combo, you can also have some instant blockers or setup or instant buff with these kinds of cards. So along with the 2-drop with the Rattle Chains, we have also Shadow Spirit. So this one is not only just a 2/1 flyer, but also can make your creatures destructible by sacrificing itself, and at the same time also a good aggro for the 2-drop. So with the Rattle Chains combo, as I mentioned earlier, you can have this benefit of just having a flashy 2/1, at the same time protect your creatures by having them resetable to mass removals or mass destroy effects if there's those situations that you can have. Along with another important 2-drop is Shacklegeist. It is not only a 2-to-cast 2/2, but also can have this ability that can tap creatures you control. Just need to tap 2 untap spirits you control. At the same time, it is also a flyer by itself. The only drawback here is that it can only block creatures with flying inside blocking no grounders. So this ability is very important, in which you would need to tap out very relevant creatures from your opponent, since most of the time you won't have really the counter to do the counter spells for this. And so tapping them would be the best option for your build, while at the same time you would also aggro them out with the spirits that you got from, for example, from the collective company that you cast. So that is for the 2 drops. Again, for the last of the 3 drops are this Sky Flip Operation for non-land token removal, and also Spell Queller. This is basically a very important counter spell of the spirits, wherein you can exile like a spell with converted mana cost 4 or less, and there's also a 2/3 flyer flash ability. The only drawback is that when it leaves the battlefield, the exiled card may cast that card without paying its mana cost. So that's not really important on the last part, because the main purpose here is you need to outtempo your opponent, countering their best spells, protecting your creatures with some flashy rattle chains, and also buff them up and then attack in the air for the win. So 4 copies of that for a total of 31 creatures, which all or mostly are utility creatures in your lineup. Now for the only 6 instant in this deck, we have the instant Coco or collective company, wherein you can put the 2 cards from the top 6 cards library with mana value 3 or less on the battlefield. And then Lofty Denial, only 2 copies of this, but still very important in countering spells. That is, if you have a flyer, counter that spell is controller phase 4 instead. So now for the land distribution, since this is basically of the Bant colors, we just expect the mana fix composed of shock lands, some botanical symptoms, and also some pathways to do the fix. And also some new cards added was from Miracles, which was reprinted in Dominaria United, and also a Darker Waste that is for the blue-white fix. That does not really need to matter for the 1 damage, but the important thing is that all of your lands are basically untapped, and making sure that your spirits would curve out pretty well in order to the aggro and the tempo main strategy would be really recognized and adapted on this build. Now for the sideboard, we can choose to select one of the reasons why these are chosen as the part of this pile. First off is Archon of Emeria. This is from the Zendika Rising rare creature, wherein a 3 to cast 2/3 flyer with ability that each player can cast more than 1 spell each turn. Non-basic lands your opponent's control and the battlefield tap. So basically a good SB against these decks that has the mechanic of Storm, or can basically storm out any shenanigans by casting more than 1 spell each turn, and also have their non-basic lands enter the battlefield tap. So basically delaying them. So as you delay their mana source, you get the chance that your aggro spells would also, or your aggro utility creatures would also curve out and prevent them from casting any of their big and early game spells. So along with it, we also have 2 copies or 1 copy of Disable Stroke. So just a good sideboard for the late game by countering target spell with mana value 4 or greater. That's basically the purpose. And also this one, Extraction Specialist, 2 copies. It can also return a creature with mana value 2 or less. As you can see, most of your utility creatures are basically 2 mana cost, such as Spells with Spirit, and we have also Rattle Chain. So having Extraction Specialist to just return them out and having them free, but also having a 3/2 life linker would also help you out against aggro and other mid-range decks that would have some batch of removables to deal with your spirits. Now for another choice here is the Catilda. Also have 2 copies. It is a Spirit Warlock by itself, but its power toughness is equal to the number of permanents you control that are spirits and enchantments. And at the same time, it has its Disturb option, wherein it becomes a legendary enchantment aura, wherein the enchanted creature has flying, lifelink, and protection from vampires, and it gets +X+X, where X is the number of permanents you control that are spirits and enchantments. So this would be a very good utility in the late game, but early on it's also a good flyer and life linker in itself. And if ever you get to face some vampires decks in the Pioneer format, then this is a very good sideboard to have ultimate blocker for them, or they would not really be able to kill out Catilda in combat damage. Next is also 2 copies of Kailash Reconstruction. For this is from Brothers War. This one is would have the creature cards with mana value to earliest put in the battlefield. So this is just basically a late game plan in which if ever your Coco or early collecting money would really fail to have those creatures added to your battlefield, or they must have been in a way was dealt with or removed or destroyed in the game, you can have Kailash Reconstruction again to cast out X artifacts. Let's say if you have 5 or 6 mana, 7 cards in your top library would really matter with having at least 3 spirit creatures that push into the battlefield. So basically a late game plan and a late game cast for this setup. Now we also have 3 copies of the Portable Hole. This is basically for aggro, such as mono black, mono red, and also maybe for humans mono white, where you can basically exile their non-permanent that has mana value 2 or less until this one leaves the battlefield. So this is a good sideboard to prevent their aggro curve, while you also at the same time set up your own and basically countering their good spells in the process. So last but not the least are 2 copies of Redain. This is also for control, wherein non-creature spells your opponents cast would cost 2 more to cast, and Snowlands would really be affected by her ability. And you have the option also to become Valmira Protector Shield. So this legendary artifact would prevent damage to you or your permanent control by preventing 1 of the damage. This would be really effective against maybe mono red, wherein they have a lot of burn spells to deal with your creatures. So becomes targeted. It is also benefit of the second line, wherein a permanent you control becomes a target of ability your opponent controls. It can be also be countered unless those controller pays 1. So 2 options, 2 good options for this card as a sideboard. And last but not the least, we have the Rest in Peace against, we can also say that it is the Grisfang decks that also makes really some good graveyard shenanigans, and also chances of any kind of the storm decks or maybe even the Phoenix decks that can be boarded in with the Rest in Peace to deal with their graveyard, and they would not be able to do the shenanigans of having to return Darkbound Phoenix back into the battlefield. So that's basically it for the sideboard, and overall the mana curve of the deck would be 2.3. This means 2 and 2 and 3 are the most costed in the list. And color distribution, we have blue for 26, white 17, and green for 4. So basically that's a blue, white with green splash, and the mana fix would really suffice to have the good curve and would not really encounter any mana color disruption in your starting hand and any or on your card draws in the early turns. So last but not the least, we have no tokens to discuss. Oh, this one, an illusion for the apparitions ability, and that's basically it. This is your Bant Spirits decks or Spirits aggro from the Japan list from Hariruya. I do hope you like this video. If you do, just like click on subscribe and notifications on the lower right for more Pioneer standard and standard deck techs to be featured now in the channel. And for the upcoming info and heads up is the Correction OLB1 deck techs, which we will try to do with each of the new card spoilers being released by Wizards, and they would have a new batch now in the coming week for us to consider the new cards that we can use for this kind of builds, and not only in standard but also in Pioneer. So that's about it, guys. Thank you for checking this one, and until the next time.